This free lesson is brought to you by IELTS Lab, our ultimate IELTS Band 7 guide and practice kit. In IELTS Lab, you will get lifetime access to over 160 IELTS lessons in all 4 test sections for both the academic and the general modules of IELTS. You will attend a daily Q&A session with an IELTS examiner where you can ask any questions you may have. You will also get unlimited writing assessments by qualified IELTS writing examiners weekly and at no additional charge. Click the link up here or in the description below to learn more about IELTS Lab. Hello and welcome to Fluently. This is our series of videos about the IELTS exam, and today we're going to think about listening. So without much further ado, let's get going. This is an overview of the IELTS exam with the 4 parts: listening, reading, writing and speaking, and each part is equal. They're all worth 25%. And let's look more closely at listening. So the listening exam is 30 to 40 minutes. You have 40 questions to answer, and each question is worth 1 mark. Let's look in a bit more detail. As I said, you've got 30 to 40 minutes for the listening, which breaks down into 30 minutes for the actual listening and 10 extra minutes, which is the time you use to transfer your answers from the question paper to the answer sheet. So you get some extra time to do that at the end. There are 40 questions, as I mentioned, and there are 4 different sections. It's divided into 4 sections. It's also important to know a couple of other things. You will hear a range of accents, okay, all English-speaking accents, so Australian maybe, American, British, lots of different ones. Also, spelling and grammar is important. Some of the questions will be words or phrases you have to write down, and those must be spelt correctly with the correct grammar. It's important. And you will hear the recording only once, so you have to listen very carefully the first time. Let's have a look in a bit more detail at the different sections. The listening exam always follows the same structure. So in section 1, you will hear a conversation between 2 people in an everyday social context. So that means, for example, at a train station. So one person is asking information about tickets and prices, and the other person works at the train station, as an example. Section 2 will be a monologue. That means just one person speaking. And again, it's in an everyday social context. So it might be someone explaining the facilities of the local library, for example. In section 3, it will be another conversation between 2, 3 or 4 people, and this will be in an educational or training context. So it might be students at university discussing an assignment, or a teacher and a student, something like that. In section 4, you'll have another monologue, and this will be on an academic subject. So it'll be similar to something you would hear during a university lecture. This is an example of the kind of thing that you'll see in section 1. So we've got a form here, and we can read the title, Packham's Shipping Agency, Customer Quotation Form. And you can see that you need to be listening for information to complete this form. So name, address, postcode, etc. In the exam, you will have time to look at the questions and read the questions before you listen, so that you know exactly what information you're listening for. So let's now listen together to the first part of this question, just to get an idea of what it sounds like.
You will hear a telephone conversation between a customer and an agent at a company which ships large boxes overseas.
Good morning. Packham's shipping agents. Can I help you?
Oh, yes. I'm ringing to make inquiries about sending a large box, a container, back home to Kenya from the UK.
Yes, of course. Would you like me to try and find some quotations for you?
Yes, that'd be great. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I need a few details from you.
Fine.
Can I take your name?
It's Jacob Mkere.
Can you spell your surname, please?
Yes, it's Mkere.
Is that M for mother?
Yes.
Thank you. And you say that you will be...
And there we go. There's our first answer. So we had the man's name as question number 1. As you'll notice from the recording, they spelt out that name. So if the answer is a person's name or a place name, they will always spell it for you. They don't expect you to know those because sometimes, especially British place names, can have quite obscure, unusual spellings. If it's a normal everyday word, you need to write that yourself and you need to get that spelling correct. But if it's a name of a person or place, don't worry about it. It'll always be spelt out for you. Let's move on to an example of section 2. Now remember, this is a monologue, so only one person speaking this time. And we've got a slightly different type of question. We're looking for short answers. So you can see in the instructions, no more than 3 words and or a number. So you're not expected to write full sentences. You're never expected to write that. You're just looking for a word or a short phrase. Okay, so let's listen to the first part.
We'll hear an extract from a talk given to a group who are going to stay in the UK.
Good evening and welcome to the British Council. My name is John Parker and I've been asked to talk to you briefly about certain aspects of life in the UK before you actually go there. So I'm going to talk first about the best ways of making social contacts there. Now, you might be wondering why it should be necessary. After all, we meet people all the time. But when you're living in a foreign country, it can be more difficult, not just because of the language, but because customs may be different. If you're going to work in the UK, you will probably be living in private accommodation, so it won't be quite so easy to meet people. But there are still...
And there are the first 2 answers, language and customs. Now, it's good for you to know that the answers will always come in the same order as the questions. So you're never jumping around trying to find the correct question, number 11, 16, 13. No, it will always follow the correct order, 11, 12, 13, and so on. That's a really helpful thing for you to know as you're listening. So let's have a look at section 3 now. Here we are, section 3. And this will be another conversation, so between 2, 3 or 4 people in an academic setting. So this example we've got here is a study on gender in physics. And this type of question is multiple choice. You're choosing A, B or C for each one. It looks like a lot of words and a lot of reading to do, but don't panic. Remember, in the exam, you will have time to read the questions before you listen. Okay, so let's listen to just the first question of this example.
And answer questions 21 to 27.
OK, Greg. So I finally managed to read the article you mentioned. The one about the study on gender in physics.
About the study of college students done by Akira Miyake and his team. Yeah, I was interested that the researchers were actually a mix of psychologists and physicists. That's an unusual combination.
Yeah, I got a little confused at first about which students the study was based on. They weren't actually majoring in physics. They were majoring in what's known as the STEM disciplines. That's science, technology, engineering and
math. Yes, but they were all doing physics courses as part of their studies.
That's correct.
And the answer is C. science, technology, engineering or mathematics, the STEM subjects. Now you may have thought the answer was B. That's because the man mentioned psychology and physics, but he was talking about that in relation to the researchers, and the question asks about the students. So you have to be a little bit careful because IELTS do quite like to do these sneaky little tricks to try and trip you up. Yeah, they're designed to trick you and see if you can tell the difference, tell the correct answer. So don't fall for those red herrings, as we call them. Just stay true to the answer. With section 4, we're back to a monologue, but this time in an academic setting. So a university lecture, basically. In our example today, it's about the spirit bear, which you can see in the first line. It is a white bear belonging to the black bear family. And you can see that there are also words missing from these lecture notes. And we just need to put one word only in each space. So let's listen to just the first part of the lecture.
Answer questions 31 to 40. Today, we continue our series on ecology and conservation with a look at a particularly endangered member of the black bear family. 1 in 10 black bears is actually born with a white coat, which is the result of a special gene that surfaces in a few. Local people.
Did you get the answer right? Yes, it's gene. Its colour comes from an uncommon gene. Now, remember what I said earlier about spelling being very important. Remember, if it's a name of a person or a place, they will spell it for you. But an ordinary word, they expect you to know how to spell it. So with a word like this, you want to be very careful that you're spelling it correctly like this, gene, and not like this, gene. These, well, jeans with an S, jeans, would be the trousers that you wear. So we don't want that type of gene. We want G-E-N-E. Yeah? So just be careful of your spelling. That's an important thing to remember. Okay, so we've had a look at a different example in each section. And you've seen some different types of questions. There are, in fact, 6 types of questions or types of tasks that they'll ask you to do. And we'll just look at each one of those now. So you will have seen some of these already in our examples. But number 1 is matching. So in this example, you can see that you're matching features to a hotel. You're matching 2 things together. Number 2, a table or chart completion. So you'll have a table and you need to fill in the missing information. So it could be prices or places to go, lots of different things. There's also sentence completion. So putting the missing words in the sentences. Now in this type, you won't get the exact same sentence written as the sentence that you hear. So it's not as easy as it looks, but you just have to listen for that information and then put the correct word in. Number 4, multiple choice. We saw that in our example from section 3. So that's your usual kind of ABC options. Number 5 is diagram labeling. So it could be something like a map, as this is for a local library, and you're listening to the instructions and labeling each room in this example of the library. And the final type is short answers, which again we saw in section 2, where you have a question and then you're just giving a word as an answer or a phrase as an answer. Now we need to think about the IELTS answer sheet. So, as I mentioned before, you'll have 30 minutes of actual listening and then 10 minutes at the end to complete this answer sheet. This is what it looks like. So on your question paper, you can write anything you want. Obviously, you're writing the answers, but you can write yourself notes, you can underline things, you can draw circles around things, anything that will help you. Then at the end, they will give you 10 minutes, during which time you need to write carefully and clearly your answers on this sheet. So only the answers written on this sheet will be marked, nothing else will be. So you must be very careful. And as we mentioned before, spelling and grammar mistakes will be penalised. So you need to fill it in very carefully. And there you go. That is a basic overview of the IELTS listening exam. So we've covered everything you need to know as a general overview for the IELTS listening. But there's one thing I'd like to say before we go, which is practice makes perfect. So you can improve your listening in many different ways. You can do practice IELTS tests, of course, which is a very useful way to improve your score and to become familiar with the test. But also, you can listen to other things that are not IELTS related, which might be more fun for you, and certainly feels like studying without actually studying. So you can listen to some music in English, some songs. You can listen to radio programs or maybe podcasts online. Anything like that will help you become familiar with listening, will improve your skills, and will be enjoyable for you. So thanks for joining us, and I hope to see you again for our next video. Bye!